Okay, I think we can get started. So, first, you should definitely go follow Fiveable on all of their social media. On Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, you will get notifications. You'll get like posts, and even on Instagram stories, you get information about the different AP subjects, streams that are happening throughout the year, in addition to some really, really funny memes that are on Instagram. So you should definitely go follow all of Fiveable social media. We'll start with an outline. So I'm going to be first talking about the new analytic rubrics, and then I'm going to move into each specific rubric. So the synthesis essay, the rhetorical analysis, and the argument essay, the exact order it is on the AP exam. And finally, I will be ending with just a short note on multiple choice changes. I anticipate this stream lasting about 50 minutes to an hour. So that means 45 to 55 minutes more content from now. So you're going to hear a lot of information, but I'll try and pause and ask for questions. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat or even in the Ask a Question tab. I'd be happy to answer them. And now we'll get started with an overview of the new analytic rubrics. So AP English Language FRQs used to be on a 9-point scale, and they used to be scored what was called holistically, which meant that they wouldn't take off points for specific things, but the AP readers from last year and before would look at your essay as a whole and decide on a score. So College Board actually changed a bunch of AP subjects this year, including the English, so language and literature. And for both of those subjects, we now have analytic rubrics for all three of those three response essays, because they're now scored out of 6. And that's the course and exam description that was released by College Board about like this month. So how it works is we call 1-4-1. I'm pretty sure your AP teachers are really going to emphasize it, because that's really all you need for the 3 essays. Just to remember 1-4-1. 1 point for the thesis, up to 4 points for evidence and commentary, and 1 point for what is called sophistication. I'm going to dive into what each category means when we get into every specific essay, but the rubrics are generally really consistent, especially for thesis and sophistication. But they're really slightly different for every single essay. So what that means is that for every one of those, every single essay that you write, either argument, rhetorical analysis, and synthesis, it's always going to be 1-4-1. It's always going to be thesis, evidence, and commentary, sophistication. So it's really uniform, I'd say. So let's start with the synthesis essay. I have an example of a rubric here. It's that television has been influential in U.S. presidential elections, and a synthesis essay is really given 6 or 7 sources, synthesize those 3 sources for support, and take a position that defends, challenges, or qualifies. So once again, it's 1-4-1. You get 1 point for the thesis that responds to the prompt, up to 4 points for evidence and commentary, which includes evidence from 3 or more sources that are relevant to the thesis, well-developed commentary that explicitly and consistently explains the relationship between the evidence and thesis, and 1 point for sophistication. And there are 5 categories. As long as you satisfy one of those 5 categories, you'll get that point. And throughout this stream, I'm going to be really emphasizing evidence and commentary, because it makes up 2/3 of every single one of your essays. And remember, the free response section makes up 55% of your AP score. So knowing this 1-4-1 and getting all 4 points on evidence and commentary, in my opinion, is probably the most important part of writing all 3 of these essays. Making sure that you have that proper evidence and making sure you have a really solid commentary. So let's get into each specific category of the synthesis essay. Let's start with the thesis point. So according to College Board's course and exam description, you need to respond to the prompt, not restating or rephrasing, and you need to take a position rather than stating there are just pros and cons. So I have some examples here of really good synthesis theses that are good and bad synthesis theses. So I'm going to give you a minimal example, a more well-developed thesis, and a response that would earn 0 points. These are all made up by me, and the prompt, I guess you could say, is like write and take a position on whether or not computers should be our children should be given computers, and whether or not they affect society. So a minimal thesis that would get you this point would simply be taking a position. Computers benefit and they develop society in the long run. That would perfectly satisfy all Board's rubric, because you are responding to the prompt and you're taking a position. You're saying that they benefit, develop society. Now, a more developed thesis would be the second one that's in that second bullet point. Computers serve important roles in our society. They spur innovation, and computers power the global economy. Overall, children should receive computers as they will continue to serve these roles in the future. What that means, what you actually see in that thesis is what we call a line of reasoning, when you state an argument, state a position, and then you build and explain your logic as a result. That is perfectly acceptable, and that would also get you the thesis point. In fact, I would probably encourage you to write a well-developed thesis, because that way you can show college and those AP readers that you are responding rather than stating the prompt. Now, an example of a thesis that would not get any points is computers are places that spark innovation, which is crazy to think there might be an end to them. That is not a thesis that would get you any points, because you're not taking a position. You're kind of going either or. You're saying, oh, computers are the places that spark innovation, but there might be an end to them, which is crazy. That's not taking a position, and that's not really responding to the prompt. Another example of a thesis that wouldn't get any points would be, there are multiple benefits and faults with computers. That would not be taking a position, and you're not really responding to the prompt in it. And like, restating and responding is a really big difference that you really need to be hitting on when you're writing a thesis. So you want to make sure you're not writing something that says like, computers are very valuable. It's just, like, you don't want to be restating like, oh, computers affect society greatly. You're not taking a position. You need to be making sure that you're asserting your opinion, and you need to be doing it very directly. Once again, that means like, you're not saying, I think computers benefit and develop society, or I think computers serve important roles. You don't need to like put it in first person, just say it. Say that computers benefit and develop society, as shown in the minimal thesis. So now we'll move into synthesis, evidence, and commentary. So once again, I'm really going to be spending a lot of time on evidence and commentary for every single one of the free response essays, because they're pretty important. Once again, it makes up 2/3 every single one of your essays. And that means, like, given that 55% of your score comes from this, like, comes from the free response section, it's really important that you get like all of the points possible. And that really hinges on evidence and commentary. So for the synthesis essay, you need to provide commentary that engages specific details from sources and integrates evidence from sources throughout to support reasoning. It also can't have any grammatical or mechanical errors. Otherwise, you can only get 3 out of those 4 points. So College Board is now changing from their holistic to their analytic rubric, and they're saying, hey, you cannot have like major grammatical errors. Otherwise, you're not properly like commentating. And that's like a shift from the past, because when we had that holistic rubric in the past, they wouldn't take points off specifically if you had any grammatical mistakes. So what synthesis, evidence, and commentary means is that you're integrating source information and you're providing analysis. For instance, I made up a source here and said that Bob Jones of NBC furthers in 2019 that computers help increase efficiency in our global economy. Therefore, children need to learn computer skills to keep up with our developing economy. And I would argue that that shows that specific evidence and commentary that College Board wants, where you're providing commentary that engages specific details from sources, and you're integrating that evidence throughout. And also, I forgot to mention, you need to be making sure that you're like putting in parentheses at the end, source A, source B, source C, source D, and that shows College Board that you're using synthesis sources. And honestly, like, we're going to get into synthesis more at the end of the first semester and the start of the second semester. So you're going to get more detailed information about writing the intro paragraphs, the body paragraphs, the conclusion paragraphs of every single one of the essays. And also, I really encourage you to get Fiveable Plus, because if you want any specific questions and want to rewatch these streams that I'm telling you about now, you can actually access replays and additional resources through a Fiveable Plus membership. It's just $5 a month, and it's so important because you get to hear a variety of different perspectives from all the AP Lang streamers, and you get to watch them even if you miss a stream. So a 0-point synthesis, evidence, and commentary would be something like, I think that computers are important because I use them every day. We're not citing one of the synthesis sources. That would not count as evidence and commentary. And I think in addition, it's really important that you focus on both aspects of evidence and commentary. So not only do you integrate evidence from sources to support your reasoning, so not only are you mentioning source A, B, C, D, and E, you're also providing commentary. So that means you're like You can't just be stating facts, 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 facts. I think that would only garner you 1 or 2 points, because what College Board really cares about is that you're expressing your voice on this argument. And I think it's on the synthesis essay specifically, it's really difficult to express your voice and show your voice. And you can do that when you provide commentary that engages details from your sources. And that means that you are providing your own analysis. Summary is death. And I'm going to repeat that over and over throughout all of my streams, whether I'm talking about the rhetorical analysis, the argument essay, or the synthesis essay. You never want to simply be summarizing. What you want instead is to be analyzing, commentating, giving your opinion. And you can especially do that on the synthesis essay, because these sources and the stimulus that they give you, that's those sources that they give you at the start of the AP packet, those will directly help you. They'll guide you and provide you analysis to support your thesis. So finally, we'll go into the last category of all of the essays, and specifically the synthesis essay, sophistication. And sophistication is new to AP, and we've actually seen them on the history AP. So on world history, US history, and even European history, they've had what's called like historical thinking, I believe, and that usually you get by like providing another category of analysis, or having like we've always the contextualization point in those history APs. So in AP Lang and even AP Lit this year, we're seeing a new category that you can get points for called sophistication. And there are 5 ways that you can earn this point. And what's really important is that you're not just using it as a phrase, you're making it and internalizing it as a part of your argument. So 5 specific categories for the sophistication point are mentioning the context of the argument, time period, and analyzing its implications. So really the contextualization point on WAP, APUSH, and Euro, but really you're integrating it as a part of your argument. You're showing how the context of the argument of your synthesis essay and the implications are like really impactful. You could also write a thesis that demonstrates nuanced consideration of text evidence and proving it in your essay. What that means is that in your thesis, you are talking about important text evidence that needs to be considered, and you're also like exemplifying that evidence and linking back to your prompt throughout the essay. I think the easiest way to get the sophistication point is this third category. It's conceding, rebutting, and or refuting other arguments that are related to your thesis. I think a lot of your AP English language teachers have already like told you for synthesis and for argument that you should be providing a concession and giving a rebuttal, or even like showing a counter argument. So like conceding something, like saying, oh, this counter argument has some validity, but I would argue, or but responding to that, that could give you sophistication points. Get you a sophistication point. You could also use rhetorical devices or make specific rhetorical choices that strengthen your argument. What that means is you're basically making your AP English language synthesis essay very, very like rhetorical. It's almost as if you're like writing an article that someone would do a rhetorical analysis for. So that means that you are, like for instance, using a metaphor, or using antithesis or syntax or diction throughout your essay that actually makes your argument stronger and is like very explicit and clear. You could also use a vivid, persuasive, or convincing prose style to strengthen your argument. And what that means is that while you're writing, you're like trying to convince your AP reader or your audience. You're trying to be persuasive. You're using vivid imagery, diction. It kind of goes hand in hand with the rhetorical devices. And I think what's a little bit hard for those last two, the rhetorical devices, the vivid, persuasive, convincing prose style, is that there is there's like sort of a gray area between what is vivid, persuasive, and what isn't. So I would honestly stick to those like concessions, rebuttals, and reputations, like providing arguments, because I think those are very easy to make explicit and show your reader that you can write this sophisticated. That's probably not good, but like write with sophistication. That's how you get that sophistication point. So you want to be very explicit with that. Okay, now we'll move into the rhetorical analysis. And once again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the chat box or ask in the Ask a Question tab. And if you're here on a replay and watching me talk about these different rubrics, feel free to contact Fiveable or even look through our articles that we write, because they provide plenty of background information. In fact, I've written an article on like for and Fiveable rubrics, and also goes basically the same amount of depth about how to get a 6 on all 3 of your free response essays. So let's get into what a rhetorical analysis essay is and the rubric. So in a rhetorical analysis, you're going to be analyzing how the rhetorical choices of the author contributed to the purpose and meaning of the text. What that means is you're going to look at an author's article or a specific excerpt, and you're going to find rhetorical devices, and you're going to show how the author used those devices to make their argument more convincing or cause their audience to do something. So make them take action, for instance. Once again, it's 1 for 1 for the rhetorical analysis. What that means is you'll get 1 point for the thesis that articulates the rhetorical choices the writer made, up to 4 points for evidence and commentary. That means you're providing references to text. That means direct quotes or paraphrases. You're providing well-developed explicit commentary that explains the relationship between your evidence and thesis. And once again, 1 point for sophistication. And just like I said earlier, sophistication can be attained through a variety of categories. For the rhetorical analysis, there's 6 categories to get that point. So let's go section by section of the rhetorical analysis rubric and kind of break it down. So let's start with the thesis. So what College Book says, and what I've sort of paraphrased, is that you have to respond to the prompt with what is called a defensible thesis that analyzes the writer's rhetorical choices. And remember, a rhetorical analysis is the second word. It's an analysis. It's not a summary. It's not an argument essay. You're not agreeing or disagreeing with what the author said. You're analyzing how the choices they made in that rhetorical analysis makes their argument more convincing. So I'm actually going to show one example of your rhetorical analysis thesis that will basically get you this point. It says, in her essay discussing racial divide, Bob uses many strategies to appeal to the audience's ethos, logos, and pathos. That is perfectly acceptable thesis. And once again, you could go more in depth. You could say that in Bob's essay, he or she specifically tries to convince the audience that we should be working to stop the racial divide through rhetorical devices such as antithesis, such as metaphors and ethos, logos, and pathos, or an appeal to emotion, an appeal to logic, and an appeal to authority. That's a more developed thesis, and you could also use that. I'm actually going to really show 2 examples of 0 point theses, because I think it's sometimes students, when they write rhetorical analysis, they struggle with how you can specifically write that thesis. So one example is, in his speech to the board, Bob uses several rhetorical devices to convey his point. It's not defensible, and it's not analysis. You're not providing examples of their thesis. You're not talking about their argument. And that's why this is a 0 point thesis, because you're not going extra mile and talking about what kind of rhetorical devices they use and how they analyze, how they specifically, how they prove the rhetorical devices actually led to them convincing the audience. Another 0 point thesis would be, Bob makes a sophisticated speech to encourage his audience when he says when he talks in the speech of the income gap between rich and poor. That's not a defensible thesis, and you're not analyzing rhetorical choices. That's what College Book really wants you to do. They want you to exemplify specific examples of rhetorical choices that the author uses. Also, you're trying to make it defensible. So that means you're providing a snippet of their arguments, and then showing how those rhetorical devices and the rhetorical choices are specifically to their audience feeling more convinced. That's what the rhetorical analysis is. That's how you get to this point. We'll move on to some commentary. I'm going to spend a bit more time on. So you need, again, there's points now on the rhetorical analysis, and that makes it very, very important, because it means you're providing it's 2/3 of your rhetorical analysis score, and if you only get 2 points, for instance, on the section, you're not, you're at max 4 out of 6 points, and you really want to be for 5 or 6 out of 6 on all 3 of these. In fact, I would argue you should be shooting for perfection. 6 out of 6 is perfectly attainable for all 3 of these essays. And with Fiveable, this year, we're going to really see how we can make that happen. So let's start off with evidence. You need to be making sure you're integrating evidence to support your analysis, and that evidence means that you are citing text evidence and you're paraphrasing the author's words. You also need to be providing commentary that uses text details that draws conclusions about rhetorical choices. And once again, if you have grammatical errors, then you can only get 3 points maximum out of 4 for evidence and commentary. So on the rhetorical analysis, I would really encourage you to integrate your text quotes rather than simply doing a hanging. So, for instance, on this first bullet point for evidence and commentary, they say, adversity, Obama passionately appeals to the audience's emotion and asserts that they prove the power of this use of pathos. Obama's more persuasive because in that second sentence, like this is like a perfect example of evidence and commentary. First sentence, citing specific evidence in the author's article. You're saying, oh, it appeals to audiences what? He exemplifies metaphor or antithesis. And then you get a text quote that you try to embed in your sentence. We're actually have in, I think, November or December, I'm not sure yet, but the school year, we're actually going to have a dedicated stream embedding quotes because honestly, it makes your prose style more convincing and it's going to look better to those AP readers and it's going to show that you know how to use evidence effectively. And 0 evidence and commentary would be saying something like, I think that Obama's presidency was good or bad, and it shows that this is true. This is an example of what not to do on your rhetorical analysis because what you're doing is you're not analyzing rhetorical choices in that specific article. Instead, what you're doing is you're commenting on the validity of their argument. That's not what you're doing with rhetorical analysis, and I think it's a big mistake that a lot of AP Lang students like come in and they do on your rhetorical analysis. Because honestly, in 10th grade or English 1 and English 2, like you're not doing a lot of like you're not analyzing nonfiction pieces, and you're not like talking about rhetorical choices. So you come into AP Lang as an AP Lang student, that's a shift that you're going to make when you're writing this second essay of the AP exam. So making sure, like for evidence commentary, rhetorical analysis, making sure that first are citing evidence in the author's article or excerpt, and then going the next mile and analyzing and proving how that piece of text makes their argument more convincing is really important. And what I learned from my AP Lang teacher and what I try and tell like anyone who's like an AP Lang student is that what you need to be doing in a rhetorical analysis is 2 things. First, like providing the reason why the author used rhetorical device. So like Obama used pathos, Obama uses pathos because and then explaining how that rhetorical device actually makes their argument more convincing. So it's 2 things. First, I'm just going to repeat it again in kind of order. First is explaining why the author used the rhetorical device. And second, explaining how that rhetorical device makes their argument more convincing. And that is like the core of rhetorical analysis that I think will help you earn those 4 evidence and commentary points for the rhetorical analysis. And we'll now finally move into the last category with sophistication. So there are 6 ways that you can earn this point. And once again, you can't just use it as an offhanded phrase. You have to make sure that you're incorporating it and internalizing it in your rhetorical analysis, like throughout the essay. And you're not just like, once again, like just like briefly talking about it for maybe a sentence or a few words. So I'll go through each category specifically and how you can get the point. So the first way is that your right demonstrates nuanced consideration of text evidence and proving it. So again, you can cite specific examples that the author uses in the thesis. You're making sure that you're incorporating that evidence throughout your analysis and explaining how that specific text evidence makes their argument more convincing, a core part of a rhetorical. Secondly, you can earn explaining significance or relevance of a text purpose in a larger context, very similar to conceptualization in history, the AP history, DQ, LEQ, which means that you're providing context and the like you're showing text significance or relevance to that text. So you can say, for instance, here's AP FRQ was about Gandhi. So you can talk about how Gandhi's argument that citizens should be like stepping up and like doing democracy, like, you can explain the significance of that purpose in a larger context and link how like you could link the text evidence to prove that larger purpose and that larger significance. The third way you could earn the sophistication point is, once again, conceding, rebutting, and or refuting other arguments. So what this means is that you could go through and you could say, oh, some may argue that this author's use of metaphor is ineffective and it actually weakens the essay. And you go and respond to that. That would help you earn sophistication. And I think it also goes hand in hand with the fourth way you can earn the sophistication point, which is recognizing and accounting for contradictions and or complexities within a text. That means you're showing how like the author's use of antithesis is not so beneficial, or how the author contradicts themselves and it weakens the author's purpose. I think a rhetorical analysis is not only pointing out the good things in an essay, but also showing how the author could have made their essay stronger. And that's the core of the fourth point for sophistication. The fifth way you can earn sophistication is using rhetorical devices or making choices that strengthen your own argument. And this is very, very like, I don't know how to explain it. It's sort of like, I guess, meta, if that's the best way to say it. What that means is like you are writing your rhetorical analysis about the rhetorical choices that an author uses, and in your rhetorical analysis, you are incorporating rhetorical choices. So like essentially what you're doing is you're writing an essay that people could write a rhetorical analysis about. You're making rhetorical choices, you're using metaphor and simile and antithesis and ethos, pathos, logos within your essay, analyzing like another text. That's how you get the fifth category. And the sixth category is using a vivid, persuasive, or convincing prose style that strengthens your argument. It's very similar to the fifth point. All you're doing is making your argument more convincing and persuasive by using a specific prose style that will help strengthen your argument. And I know that sounds like I just repeated myself, but what you're doing is like incorporating imagery, you're incorporating and making your text more like pretty, I guess, or like you're using figurative language, doing things that makes your style, makes the way you write more convincing to that AP reader. And that's how you learn sophistication. All right. And finally, we move into the last essay, which is the argument essay. And we have about like 18 to 28, like, this is gonna last like 20 to 30 minutes left. And I just wanted to like make a note about the timing. You have a very limited time span on the argument essay, like sorry, on all three of your essays, because it's not like world history or US history where like time to write SAQs, time to write you have like reading from ETBQ sources. In AP Lang, all they do is they start the timer, and for my AP Lang test, they told us when 10 minutes was left. And that was like pretty, it was a time crunch. And what happened was that people spent a lot of time on their synthesis essay where you have to like do source analysis, very similar to English and world history. And then you have to write that rhetorical analysis. You have to go through and look the entire like article and look at rhetorical devices. And then like that person called 10 minutes left, and they weren't done with the rhetorical analysis. They were like 2/3 of the way through. So they had to speed up and then try and brainstorm and write their argument essay really, really quickly, and kind of ran out of time. And that's like one of the biggest hurdles to overcome in AP Lang. But once again, if you tune into our Fiveable streams throughout the year, in fact, when we get into the three essays, we talk about like the exam overview in a few days from today. Like Stephanie Kirk is going to be talking about these new rubrics and the exam overview as a whole and how you can best time manage. So when you tune into Fiveable streams, we're definitely going to help you out with all different aspects of AP. So let's talk about the argument essay now. So the point of this argument essay is that you're writing an essay where you explain your reasoning and create an argument. It's very similar to a synthesis essay. Typically, teachers will either they will use the argument and then teach a synthesis essay, or vice versa, because they're very, very similar. It's the one for one is virtually exactly the same. There's the same 5 categories for sophistication. Your thesis has to respond to them, and your 4 points of evidence and commentary are very similar, minus the analysis. So we'll go into the category depth and talk about how you can earn 1 point, 4 points, and 1 point on every single element of the argument essay rubric. So first is the thesis. Very first, the argument or sorry, the synthesis essay. You have to respond to the prompt. You're not restating or rephrasing, and you're taking a position rather than stating that there are just pros and cons. So I use computers this time around, or sorry, I did computers once again, and just show how you can get that thesis point. So once again, the whole the most simplified thesis you can provide is like computers benefit and develop society in the long run. That states a position and it responds to the prompt. So it gets you the 1 point. You could also talk about how computers serve important roles in our society. For innovation, computers power the global economy. Overall, children receive computers as they will continue to serve these roles in the future. That is what we call line of reasoning, as I mentioned earlier. And what that means is that you are taking an argument, you are explaining specific sub-claims, and you're kind of like doing what I call tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them. So you're kind of outlining what you're going to say in your essay, and then you're telling them, basically. And finally, the 0-point thesis would be simply saying computers are the places that spark innovation, which is crazy that there might be an end to that. Or saying something like computers have multiple benefits and multiple saying that I think computers could be beneficial, but they also could be harmful. You're taking the pros and cons aside, you're not responding. That is going to be problematic, and it's not going to earn you that thesis point. But it's okay. We're going to go through how to write an intro paragraph for the argument, the synthesis, and the rhetorical. You will learn how to do thesis practice. I'm sure your AP Lang teachers are going to provide you a lot of FRQ practice in the class. Let's move on to the 4 points for evidence commentary. And this is really important, and I'm going to repeat myself a lot, but just remember, is the essay, the argument essay, in addition to college work, how you can analyze. So for the argument essay, you have to provide commentary that engages specific evidence, and you need to integrate that evidence throughout to support reasoning. And same thing with the other 2 essays, you cannot have grammatical or otherwise, you can only maximum, and you won't have points for the argument essay. And actually, I'm citing a current event here to use on the stream that is 1 week from today. It's going not real because you can cite them in your argument essay like I did here. So the Hong Kong protests in July exemplify the power of networking and computers as people could collaborate online to organize and express their voice. That is an example of integrated evidence, the Hong Kong protests in July. That's a current event, and that's something you could really, really use for your argument essay. We're going to talk about the different types of evidence you could use for the argument essay come January in our Fiveable streams, and you can also access a huge library of replays. So we've streamed for AP Lang last year too. So in case you need help with something that we haven't quite touched on yet, if you're getting Fiveable Plus membership, which is just $5 a month, you can actually learn how to incorporate evidence, what types of evidence to use. So once again, current events are really important, and they will provide a lot of valuable depth and analysis for your evidence and commentary. Now, a 0-point evidence and commentary would be saying something like, I think that computers are effective since I use them in class. Using an opinion is not going to earn you any evidence because it's not something that you can show that it's true. You can use some personal anecdotes in certain cases, but making an opinion isn't just these evidence and commentary points. I would argue that using things like history and incorporating things from your April pickup class is a really, really good way to get that evidence and commentary point rather than using anecdotes from your classroom. So, like making sure that you're providing that commentary, like engaging that evidence to like draw conclusions that are linked to your thesis, that's going to be the most important part of evidence and commentary. So it's like a two-step process. First, you have to find relevant evidence and evidence that is directly tied to your thesis. Then you have to explain how that specific evidence can actually help you prove your argument, and that's what your commentary is. And once again, the final category is sophistication. So there are 5 ways to earn this point. And once again, you need to be making sure that your sophistication is incorporated into your argument, not just a phrase or a reference, a few sentences or a few words. You need to make sure that you're incorporating it throughout your essay. So first, you could simply mention the context of the argument and time periods. That means you're just analyzing implications and you're talking about how, if we're computers example, you could say computers are becoming more and more important in the 21st century as they power stock markets, they power like a variety of like different parts of our world. Automation is going to become the future. Mentioning the context of that argument and then talking about your thesis and continually linking back to that greater context, that could get you the sophistication point. And once again, it's just like contextualization on AP World and on AP US History. The second category for sophistication is writing a thesis that demonstrates nuanced consideration of text evidence and then proving it in the essay. That means that you're citing evidence in your thesis, sort of, and you're like mentioning it, and you're saying, oh, it's really like, you could say like current events in this country are demonstrating the increasing importance of computers. And then you can go into your body paragraphs and talk about like how that evidence and that, like you could use your commentary to prove that evidence shows your thesis. It's kind of complicated, but it's what you should be doing in an argument essay. The third way you get the sophistication point is conceding, rebutting, and or refuting other arguments that are related to your thesis. And once again, is probably, in my opinion, the best way that you could earn the sophistication point because it's very, very simple. You could write multiple body paragraphs about like, you could write a body paragraph like at the end of your 3 body paragraphs, or like your body paragraphs to talk about how while the other argument may say this and this, like you can respond to that argument. You could say their argument is not valid because, or you could concede throughout each of your body paragraphs and say the other side may like contend that computers hurt our children's eyes and they make them more attached, like less attached to people and human interactions. However, say something like create some analysis that proves that point wrong. And I think it's very easy to make explicit, and it's very easy to get that sophistication point. The fourth way that you can get this point is using rhetorical devices for making choices that strengthen your own argument. And once again, that means that you're using literary devices like antithesis, metaphor, even ethos, logos, citing like an appeal to authority or appealing to emotion. Those make your argument more convincing. They strengthen your argument. And remember, the whole purpose of an argument essay is to present an argument that is convincing. So like when you use those rhetorical devices, they will strengthen your essay. The final way you can get this sophistication point is by using a vivid, persuasive, or convincing prose style that strengthens your own. What that means is that you are making your argument essay very persuasive, very convincing, and you're trying to use diction, syntax, or imagery that can make your style of writing more convincing to them, that make your argument stronger. So that is like that last way. Before we get into multiple choice, I just wanted to briefly recap in case like you happen, like in case you're jumping into the replay to this point. What we're talking about here is the 1-4-1, and that's the core of all 3 English language rubrics. It means that you can get 1 point for the thesis, 4 points for evidence and commentary, and 4 points for sophistication. And what that means, every single one of your AP language essays, you're going to be graded on a 1-4-1 analytic rubric. So making sure that you're spending time writing effective thesis, making sure that you're really working on the bulk of that evidence and commentary, that will be extremely important for the AP, for your AP English language exam. And finally, making sure that you satisfy sophistication. And I've gone through a lot, over 17 slides of content. So if you happen to jump in late, or if you're watching this, if you're watching this on a replay, feel free to skip ahead if you already know some information, or if you need specific help with one rubric, or need information on a specific essay. So finally, we'll move into multiple choice changes. So what this basically means is we have our multiple choice section. I know that this stream is technically just about rubrics, but I think it's pretty important to briefly touch on multiple choice because it makes up 45% of your score. I'm not going to go that into depth about the multiple choice today. Stephanie Kirk is going to go more she's going to provide detailed analysis of every single category, these rhetorical analysis questions, the composition questions, and her stream will be really, really good. So you should definitely tune in. And if you're actually on app.fiveable.me, if you're logged into a Fiveable account, you can turn on notifications for AP English language, and you can even download the Crowdcast app on your phone, and you'll get notifications when we're live and when AP Lang streams are happening. So to talk about multiple choice briefly, basically there are 45 questions in total, and it's really nice because there used to be 55 questions, 50 to 55 questions on the AP Lang exam. So now there are less questions that you have to do, 45, and you have an hour to do them. It's separated into two categories. The first is 23 to 25 rhetorical analysis questions. That means that you are doing what you're going to do in the rhetorical analysis essay. Lines 11 through 20 can be used to support what claims about the writer's tone. The writer introduces a hypothetical scenario, primarily to A, B, C, and D, right? So you're going to be analyzing the prompt. You're going to basically show how rhetorical devices or how specific excerpts of the prompt can make their argument more convincing or show something about rhetorical devices. And questions that used to be on the AP test, such as vocabulary and context, what does this word mean in line 27? Or identify the rhetorical device in line 17. Those kinds of questions are no longer in the AP test. So College Board has made the AP multiple choice a little bit easier, especially because they've added rhetorical composition questions. It's just revising and editing. It's going to be about 20 to 22 questions on your AP exam. So for instance, the writer wants to add a phrase at the beginning of sentence 2 to set up a comparison with the idea in sentence 1. Which of the following choices best accomplishes the goal? That is probably a question you'll see in the SAT writing section, and now they will appear on the AP Lang test. You could also use something like all of the following pieces of evidence help achieve this purpose, except, and then look through that specific cited area of that literary excerpt, and then find the piece of evidence that doesn't achieve the purpose. Or which of the following sentences would both capture the audience's interest and provide the most effective introduction? So that would be you would be looking at which of these is the best sentence. So unlike the writing section of the SAT, you're not going to be saying stuff like, oh, which is the right grammatical usage of lay versus lie, or the right punctuation. Rather, you're going to be seeing more composition questions. So more questions that are asking you to make an author's argument stronger. So that means you're going to be doing what you're going to be doing in your AP classes and learning about how to strengthen your writing, learning about grammar rules, learning about developing really precise sentences. Those things that you learn in your AP Lang class will help you immensely on the AP exam on the multiple choice section, because you're going to be doing it for half of that multiple choice section composition. And finally, there are going to be 5 sets of shorter passages. In the past, there were 4 sets of passages and 50 to 55 questions on each. They've now cut it down, so there's 9 questions per passage, I believe, and you're going to be really emphasizing. You're going to be reading shorter prompts and shorter excerpts, and that's really what there is to multiple choice. And once again, Stephanie Kirk will be streaming about this in just a few days. You should definitely go tune into her streams and go much more in depth. And she's can provide some really, really good analysis about how you can score well on the choice section. And finally, I'll go to my works cited. All this basically is like what I talked about and the resources I used throughout today's live. So you can look at College Board's course exam description and their updates for 2019 through 2020. Those of these links are accessible on the internet. You can look up like AP Lang changes for 2020, or AP Lang course exam description. In fact, I really encourage you to use these resources because, for instance, the course and exam description has information about, like, they have like questions and official rubrics the College Board uses to grade all of your essays. So like your AP readers in June are going to be looking at your sample essays with the same rubrics that are published on the internet. That's of course the exam description. You could also look at the updates for 2019 and 2020, all you teachers out there. You could see like ways you can change your lesson plans on like the difference between the holistic rubrics and the analytic rubrics, the difference with the multiple choice section from last year to this year. So I'm actually going to reserve the last 2 minutes or so for questions. So if any of you have any questions or any information that you want to know about AP English language, please feel free to ask now. You can either ask in the chat or you can ask in the Ask a Question tab. Otherwise, I'm going to end the stream in about 4 minutes or so. And thank you so much for tuning in once again. I really appreciate it. And for all of those of you watching Rubrics, feel free to tune in for our next AP. For the people that are talking too much about Rubrics, for the people who have been watching this stream on a replay, if you want more information and have a specific question, feel free to tune into one of our next AP Link streams in our live stream, our live reviews, and you can ask questions to our live streamers. We'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, you can even like look up in our article directory or even in replays. You can search specific search terms for questions you have about a specific section. So I'm just going to hold for the next half minutes or so. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Also, just to note, if you are wanting to get access to slides, like these slides that are seen here, or any extra resources or previous streams, once again, you have to have a Fiveable Plus membership, unfortunately, or not unfortunately. It's actually really beneficial because Fiveable Plus give you, we even have special streams the week of the AP exam that are only accessible for Fiveable Plus subscribers. So by paying that $5 a month and paying all the way to May, you're actually going to be saving money. And like instead of buying, like, for instance, a prep book, like one of those major prep book companies, I think having these live reviews and direct student to student, teacher to student interaction, that will help you more than if you're just reading a literature textbook by yourself. I also encourage you to talk to your AP English language teacher. I'm sure they hold tutorial sessions or have like office hours. If you have any questions, like they know you're writing best. They read your AP argument essays, they read your practice essays and sections in class. So if you have any questions about you, you can ask them. And they will be immensely helpful for like personal feedback and stuff. But we're also going to be doing live essay reviews, live prompts, and those will be really, really like special. We're going to be doing live grading here at Fiveable. So like our AP language department is really strong. We have like really, really great teacher and student streamers, both for professional development, for teachers, for dedicated streams for every single free response and multiple choice section, and even with live grading sessions I mentioned earlier. Those will be really beneficial for you. Okay, if you don't have any questions for me, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate all of you who came in for parts of the stream or the entire stream. I know 50 minutes, 55 minutes is a lot to digest for like the rubrics for all the essays, given that your AP teacher is probably going to teach like essay by essay by essay, and they're going to use them as their core units. I'm so happy that you tuned in, and if you're watching the replay, thank you so much for sticking with me. And that's it for today. Thank you so much.